You think today's celebrity scandals are shocking? In Hollywood's golden age, beloved stars beat their children so severely that two took their own lives. America's greatest hero was openly prejudiced and used his power to destroy minority actors' careers. The man who sang White Christmas chose cruelty over love, and his sons paid the price for decades. John Wayne, the all-American hero who was anything but John Wayne, stood as Hollywood's ultimate symbol of American masculinity, the cowboy who defined what it meant to be a hero. For 4 decades, he rode across movie screens embodying courage, patriotism, and American values. Children wanted to grow up to be him. Men wanted to stand tall. Women trusted him to protect what mattered. He was the face America showed the world, strong, righteous, unshakable. A 1971 Playboy interview revealed the man behind the myth. Wayne defended white supremacy, stating he believed in it until the blacks are educated to a point of responsibility. He disparaged Native Americans as selfish people who wanted land. These weren't private thoughts leaked against his will. He said them proudly on the record, believing he was right. The interview exposed decades of discriminatory behavior whispered about in Hollywood, but never confirmed. Wayne actively opposed giving substantial roles to minority actors. He used his enormous influence to block casting decisions that might challenge the status quo based on ethnicity. On his own film sets, cast members witnessed his treatment of Native American and African American performers. Dismissive, disrespectful, dehumanizing. He opposed civil rights legislation publicly, lending his iconic status to those fighting against equality. Wayne didn't just hold private bigotry. He weaponized his power to prevent talented minority actors from succeeding. Every role he influenced, every casting decision he swayed, represented an opportunity stolen. His American values were hatred wrapped in a flag. The hero millions wanted to emulate represented some of America's ugliest instincts, and he carried those beliefs to his grave in 1979, never acknowledging the harm he caused. Wayne's bigotry poisoned an entire industry. But Hedda Hopper took career destruction to an even more systematic level, from behind a typewriter. Hedda Hopper, the gossip columnist who destroyed lives and called it journalism. Hedda Hopper sat at her desk, wearing one of her elaborate hats, and with a few typed sentences, she could end a career. Her daily column reached 35 million readers across America. Studio executives feared her. Stars courted her favor desperately. Cross her, and you might never work in Hollywood again. She was genuinely skilled at her craft. No one could sniff out scandal or craft a devastating paragraph quite like Hopper. That skill made her dangerous. During the McCarthy era, Hopper became more than a gossip columnist. She became an instrument of political persecution. She dedicated her power to destroying anyone she suspected of communist sympathies. Suspicion was enough. When her column printed a name alongside terms like communist sympathizer, that person found themselves unemployable overnight. The question everyone asked, would Hopper come for them next? No one knew. That uncertainty kept Hollywood paralyzed. Charlie Chaplin was forced into permanent exile, partly because of Hopper's relentless campaign. She helped create an atmosphere of fear so pervasive that actors and directors lived in terror of appearing on her list. Jean Seberg had her life systematically destroyed when Hopper helped spread false FBI rumors. Seberg never recovered, struggling with mental health issues until her tragic passing in 1979. But Hopper's cruelty extended beyond politics. She maintained personal vendettas, using her column to destroy marriages through manufactured scandals. When she learned an actor was concealing their private life, she would approach them with a choice: cooperate with her demands or face exposure. She blackmailed closeted actors into fake relationships and studio-arranged marriages, holding their careers hostage. Studios feared Hopper more than they protected their own stars. She manufactured scandals when real ones weren't sensational enough. Lives were destroyed, careers ended. While Hopper passed away wealthy and celebrated in 1966, having faced 0 consequences for the terrorism she committed with her typewriter. Her skill as a writer became a weapon. Talent without conscience is terrifying. Hopper destroyed careers through public exposure, but Bette Davis preferred looking her rivals in the eye while destroying them. Bette Davis, the queen who crushed her competition. Bette Davis built her legend as the actress who fought the studio system and won. She sued Warner Brothers for better roles, demanded respect in an industry that treated actresses as disposable, and paved the way for women to be taken seriously as artists. Her fierce intelligence made her a feminist icon. Audiences loved her precisely because she refused to be controlled, the battle axe with a backbone. What they didn't see was how she wielded that hard-won power. Davis's treatment of Miriam Hopkins revealed the calculated cruelty beneath her professional reputation. Davis viewed Hopkins as a threat. For more than a decade, she waged a systematic campaign to destroy her. She spread vicious rumors about Hopkins' behavior, personal life, declining looks. When they were cast together, Davis used her influence to demand Hopkins receive unflattering camera angles and unfavorable editing. She lobbied studios to remove Hopkins from projects entirely. During the filming of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane in 1962, Davis's treatment of Joan Crawford went beyond professional rivalry into psychological warfare. Crew members witnessed Davis deliberately trying to make Crawford look bad on camera. During physical scenes, Davis actually kicked Crawford, later claiming it was method acting. She spread rumors about Crawford's drinking, knowing the studios were already concerned about her reliability. Multiple actresses who worked with Davis once refused to work with her again. The atmosphere she created on sets was toxic, perfectionistic to the point of cruelty, with Davis using her reputation as an excuse to humiliate anyone she viewed as threatening. She didn't fight the studio system for all women. She fought it for herself, then used her victory to destroy other women who might threaten her position. The feminist icon actually set back other women's careers, clearing the field of competition. Her legendary professionalism was weaponized perfectionism, and the battle axe persona wasn't strength. It was cruelty given a pass because genius supposedly required it. Davis destroyed women through professional sabotage. But when Frank Sinatra felt disrespected, his response was immediate, physical, and brutal. Frank Sinatra. When old blue eyes turned black and blue, Frank Sinatra's comeback story inspired millions, from washed-up crooner to Hollywood royalty and musical legend by mid-decade. His Rat Pack image embodied effortless cool. His legendary generosity to down-on-their-luck performers was genuine. Friends treasured his absolute loyalty. The public saw the swagger, the tilted fedora, the knowing smile. That charm was real, which made what happened when someone crossed him all the more shocking. The pattern of violence started early and never stopped. In 1947, Sinatra punched journalist Lee Mortimer outside Cairo's nightclub, sending him to the hospital. Mortimer had written unfavorable reviews. Sinatra's response was his fists. In 1966, he attacked photographer Eddie Schisser outside Jason's restaurant because Schisser tried to take his picture. The photographer required medical treatment. The Carl Cohen incident at the Sands Hotel in 1967 revealed the depth of Sinatra's rage. During a dispute about credit, Sinatra became so enraged that he pulled a weapon. Cohen, a casino executive, responded by punching Sinatra in the face, knocking out his front teeth. But Sinatra's bodyguards put Cohen in the hospital. Then there was the Frederick Wiseman case. In 1966, Sinatra's bodyguard beat businessman Wiseman nearly to the point of ending his life. Wiseman required skull surgery and faced permanent injury. Sinatra claimed no involvement, but witnesses said he ordered or encouraged the attack. The case settled out of court, and the story largely disappeared. Even Ava Gardner, who loved him despite their volatile marriage, described moments when she feared for her safety. His jealous rages were legendary. The swagger America loved was unchecked rage protected by money, fame, and connections to organized crime figures like Sam Giancana. Studios buried assault incidents with financial settlements. Press outlets feared retaliation and buried stories. His power grew so absolute that victims chose silence over career destruction. The chairman of the board was actually a violent bully who bought his way out of consequences. Sinatra's violence was explosive and personal, but Otto Preminger's cruelty was calculated, systematic, and professional. He turned film sets into psychological punishment chambers. Otto Preminger, the director who perfected on-set abuse. Gene Seberg was 17 years old, standing on a film set in 1957, crying. Again. For the third hour. Otto Preminger watched her break down, and he didn't call for a break. He screamed louder. This wasn't a bad day. This was every day. This was the price of being chosen. To understand why this was happening, you need to know who Preminger was. He commanded respect in Hollywood as a director of important films. Laura, Anatomy of a Murder. These were considered cinema classics. His demanding reputation was framed as artistic perfectionism. Work with Preminger, they said, and you'd be part of something significant. The reality was systematic psychological torment. Preminger had cast Seberg in St. Joan after a massive talent search. She should have felt honored. Instead, she endured months of abuse that would scar her for life. Preminger screamed at her for hours until she broke down. He didn't do it once or twice. It was daily. He deliberately destroyed her confidence, telling her she was talentless, stupid, worthless. When she cried, he berated her for being weak. Crew members witnessed Preminger making actors do 50 or more takes, not because anything was wrong, but to assert dominance and break their spirit. He needed actors broken before he felt in control. Carol Lindley described his sets as punishment chambers. Multiple actresses reported anxiety attacks that began on his sets and lasted years. Seberg's later mental breakdown and eventual tragic passing in 1979 can be traced directly back to the trauma Preminger inflicted when she was a vulnerable teenager. He took a young woman full of hope and systematically destroyed her sense of self-worth. Studios enabled his abuse for decades because he delivered profitable films on schedule. Actors were told the abuse was the price of working with genius. Preminger's genius was actually insecurity masked by sadism. The abuse wasn't about creating better art, it was about power and control. He needed to see people broken before him to feel secure. The trauma he inflicted lasted lifetimes, and he faced no real consequences. When he passed away in 1986, obituaries praised his contributions to cinema. The actors he traumatized were footnotes. Preminger's methods were professional. He destroyed actors on film sets. But Joan Crawford brought that same cruelty home, where there were no witnesses and no escape. Joan Crawford. The wire hanger was just the beginning. Joan Crawford meticulously crafted her public image as the ultimate self-made woman. Born poor, she clawed her way to the top through talent and relentless determination. Fan magazines photographed her at home with her 4 adopted children, showcasing her as a devoted, disciplined mother. She presented her home life as an extension of her professional perfectionism. Everything in order, everything controlled, everything pristine. Christina Crawford's memoir, Mommy Dearest, published in 1978, shattered that carefully constructed image. The book described years of physical abuse, beatings with wire hangers and other objects, punishments that went far beyond discipline. Christina described nighttime raids where Joan would wake the children from sleep and force them to clean already spotless rooms, screaming at them for hours about microscopic imperfections. But the abuse extended beyond the Crawford home. Studio employees and crew members had witnessed Joan's terrorizing behavior on sets for years. She demanded crew members be fired for minor infractions. She screamed at wardrobe people until they cried. Bette Davis, no stranger to difficult behavior herself, later confirmed she wasn't surprised by anything in Christina's book. The pattern was consistent across decades and victims. Crawford systematically destroyed anyone who witnessed her private cruelty or failed to worship her publicly. When Christina and Christopher were old enough to speak for themselves, she turned against them completely. Her youngest daughters disputed Christina's account, but their conflicting testimonies don't erase the documented cruelty. Crawford's final act came in her will. She explicitly disinherited Christina and Christopher, writing, "It is my intention to make no provision herein for my son Christopher or my daughter Christina, for reasons which are well known to them." Even in the end, she needed to deliver one more wound. The disciplined professional was actually a tyrant who weaponized her star power against the most vulnerable people in her life, children who had no choice but to endure. I know these stories are difficult, but here's why they matter. For 70 years, Hollywood convinced us these people were perfect. Understanding the truth doesn't diminish their art. It honors the victims who couldn't speak. And what's coming next shows that cruelty took many forms, some loud, some quiet, some hidden in plain sight. Stay with me. Crawford's abuse was hidden behind closed doors. But Tallulah Bankhead's predatory behavior was flamboyant, public, and treated as delightful eccentricity. Tallulah Bankhead, the monster who thought cruelty was charm. Tallulah Bankhead cultivated an image as Hollywood's wild, uninhibited free spirit. She said outrageous things, behaved scandalously, and got away with it all because she was just being Tallulah. Her outrageous quotes became legendary. Press coverage treated her as a bohemian artist who lived by her own rules. What looked like liberation was often predation. Behind the celebrated eccentricity was a pattern of behavior that would be recognized today as harassment and abuse. Young actresses starting their careers found themselves cornered by Bankhead in dressing rooms. She made explicit demands. When they refused, she retaliated, speaking badly of them to directors, ensuring they didn't get called back, making their professional lives difficult. The power dynamic was clear. She was established, they were vulnerable, and refusal had consequences. Would anyone speak up? They didn't. Her reputation protected her. Her jokes were often sadistic, designed not to amuse but to destroy self-esteem. She mocked young performers' bodies, their talent, their backgrounds, always publicly, always in front of others who laughed because Tallulah was doing it. She treated servants and assistants as toys to be humiliated. Staff described feeling dehumanized, but they needed their jobs. Those romantically involved with her described a different side. Multiple younger women reported that when they tried to leave relationships with her, she became violent. The bohemian free spirit turned possessive and dangerous. But because she was wealthy, famous, and protected by her eccentric artist reputation, her victims had no recourse. Complaining about Tallulah meant being labeled prudish or humorless. What Hollywood indulgently called eccentric was actually abuse enabled by wealth, fame, and the power to end careers. When she passed away in 1968, obituaries celebrated her as an original, a one-of-a-kind personality. Her victims carried their trauma in silence. The outrageous behavior that made great copy left real damage in real lives. If these revelations are shattering your image of Hollywood's golden age, subscribe now. Because what's coming next moves from professional cruelty into something far darker. Bankhead's predatory behavior was excused as bohemian freedom. But Ginger Rogers wrapped her prejudice in all-American sweetness. It came with a smile and a tap routine. Ginger Rogers. When America's sweetheart harbored ugly prejudices, Ginger Rogers embodied the girl-next-door ideal. Partnered with Fred Astaire, she glided through elegant romances in films that defined 1930s sophistication. Unlike remote goddesses, Rogers seemed relatable, wholesome, talented but accessible. Her smile suggested warmth and openness. That image concealed troubling realities. Rogers's mother, Layla Rogers, was vocally prejudiced against Jewish people and Catholics. This wasn't hidden. Layla testified before the House Un-American Activities Committee, naming names and destroying careers during the Red Scare. Her anti-Semitism was documented. But the question that haunted those who worked with Ginger, was she just following her mother's script? Or did she write her own prejudice? The evidence suggests both. Colleagues reported that Rogers expressed reluctance to work with certain directors and actors based on their religion or ethnicity. She used phrases like New York types, Hollywood code for Jewish, when discussing people she preferred not to work with. Former colleagues recalled uncomfortable comments about Catholic actors and Jewish executives. These weren't isolated incidents, but a pattern. Whether Rogers would have developed these prejudices without her mother's influence is unknowable. But she was an adult throughout her career, capable of making independent choices. She chose to maintain attitudes that excluded and discriminated. She chose never to publicly distance herself from her mother's views or repudiate the prejudice she'd been raised with. Her discrimination affected real careers and real people. Directors she refused to work with, actors she made uncomfortable on sets, executives she treated with disdain. These were human beings whose professional lives were complicated by her prejudice. When Rogers retired in 1965, her wholesome image remained intact. Those she'd excluded carried the cost silently. The all-American girl never faced her reflection. Which of these revelations has shocked you most so far? And what golden age topics should we investigate next? Let us know in the comments below. Rogers' prejudice limited opportunities, but Errol Flynn's crimes went far beyond bigotry. His actions against teenage girls should have ended with a prison cell. Errol Flynn, the swashbuckler, who was credibly accused of crimes against minors, Errol Flynn defined swashbuckling adventure. As Robin Hood, as Captain Blood, as countless romantic heroes, he was the man every boy wanted to become, and every woman wanted to meet. His charm seemed effortless, his athleticism extraordinary, his smile irresistible. Audiences loved him precisely because he made heroism look fun. The adventurer who faced danger with a grin. His self-mythologized libertine lifestyle was treated as roguish, the lovable rascal who couldn't be tamed. Behind that carefully crafted image was a pattern of predatory behavior toward teenage girls. In 1942, two teenage girls came forward with accusations. Betty Hansen was 17. Peggy Satterley was 15. Both accused Flynn of statutory violations. Their testimony in court was credible and detailed. The trial became a sensation. Would Hollywood's greatest hero be convicted? The question paralyzed the industry. Flynn's expensive lawyer, Jerry Giesler, mounted a defense that destroyed the girls' reputations. He painted them as willing participants, as gold diggers. The jury acquitted Flynn, but the trial wasn't isolated. Flynn's own autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, published in 1959, bragged about his conquests of very young women. He described pursuing girls as young as 15. He presented these encounters as adventures, as proof of his irresistible charm. He showed no recognition that these were crimes, that these girls were children. Contemporary accounts described him specifically seeking out teenage girls. His yacht was reportedly known in Hollywood circles as a place where underage girls were brought. The phrase, "in like Flynn," originated from his reputation for easy conquests. And those conquests included minors. Studio fixers knew. Colleagues knew. People whispered. But the studios protected him because he was profitable. Flynn's acquittal came despite credible testimony because he could afford the best legal defense. The studio's publicity machine worked to protect his image. The girls' lives were destroyed in court, their reputations shredded, their motives questioned. Flynn walked away and continued his career. He faced minimal professional consequences. His crimes were reframed as adventures, his victims dismissed as willing participants. When Flynn passed away in 1959 at age 50, obituaries celebrated his contributions to cinema. The girls he harmed were forgotten footnotes. Justice was never served. The swashbuckling hero was actually a predator who targeted vulnerable children and bought his way out of consequences. Flynn's crimes targeted the young and powerless. But the Fontaine De Havilland feud shows that cruelty sometimes targets those who share your blood. Joan Fontaine, the sister who made rivalry a blood sport. The Fontaine De Havilland feud became Hollywood's most famous sibling rivalry. Both sisters were accomplished actresses with elegant screen presences. Joan Fontaine won the Academy Award for Suspicion in 1942. When her name was announced, cameras captured her sister Olivia De Havilland attempting to congratulate her. Fontaine publicly refused the gesture, turning away from her sister in front of the industry and millions of viewers. That moment symbolized a rift that would last 7 decades. What appeared to be mutual rivalry was actually one-sided harassment. Fontaine's autobiography revealed the depth of her vindictiveness. She described deliberately spreading rumors about De Havilland's personal life. She admitted attempting to sabotage her sister's career opportunities. She took satisfaction in publicly humiliating Olivia whenever possible. Friends and colleagues who knew both sisters told a revealing story. De Havilland attempted reconciliation multiple times over the decades. After their mother passed away in 1975, Olivia reached out suggesting they end the feud. Fontaine refused. When both were elderly and honors came their way, De Havilland again extended offers of peace. Fontaine rejected every attempt. This wasn't two sisters equally at fault. This was one sister wanting peace and another choosing war. De Havilland wanted to repair their relationship. Fontaine wanted revenge for perceived childhood slights, even in old age, even when both had achieved success and acclaim. Fontaine couldn't let go of her resentment. Joan Fontaine passed away in 2013 without ever reconciling. She took her vindictiveness to the grave. Olivia de Havilland lived until 2020, having spent 70 years attempting to make peace with a sister who chose spite over family. The elegant actress spent 7 decades tormenting her own sister. The sadness isn't just in the waste of a sisterhood. It's in Fontaine's absolute refusal to show mercy, even when freely offered. Fontaine's decades-long campaign was sustained psychological warfare. But Bing Crosby's abuse destroyed his son so thoroughly, the two couldn't escape even decades later. Bing Crosby, America's dad, had a very dark side. Bing Crosby was America's voice. The crooner priest in Going My Way, the warm father in countless films, the man who sang White Christmas, whose voice defined American holidays. His public image was beyond reproach. Wholesome, talented, devoted to family, he seemed to embody everything good about American entertainment. In 1983, 4 years after Bing's passing, his son Gary published a memoir titled Going My Own Way. The book shattered the carefully maintained image. Gary described brutal beatings with belts that left welts and bruises. He described emotional terrorism, a father who used fear and physical punishment as his primary parenting tools. Weekly weigh-ins where any weight gain resulted in severe punishment. Military-style discipline that crossed far beyond structure into abuse. A household where children lived in constant fear. 2 of Gary's brothers, Philip and Dennis, confirmed his account. They too had endured the beatings, the emotional cruelty, the impossible standards enforced through violence. The aftermath proved devastating. Dennis took his own life in 1991. Lindsay ended his life in 1989. Both brothers struggled with substance dependency, failed relationships, and an inability to escape their childhood trauma. Gary himself battled problems with alcohol and depression until his passing in 1995. But the cruelest revelation came from Crosby's second family. After his first wife's passing, Bing married Catherine Grant in 1957. They had 3 children together. Those children described a completely different father. Loving, involved, affectionate, present. He attended their school events. He showed them warmth. This transformation proves that Crosby's abuse of his first 4 sons wasn't ignorance about proper parenting. He was capable of being a loving father. He demonstrated that capability with his second family, which means his treatment of his first sons was a choice. He chose cruelty. He chose violence. 3 of his 4 sons from his first marriage passed away struggling until their final moments with the wounds he inflicted. Bing Crosby never publicly acknowledged the pain he caused. The warm voice of White Christmas inflicted suffering that echoed across decades. Crosby's abuse destroyed his sons behind closed doors. But Loretta Young's cruelty came wrapped in religious righteousness. She wielded morality as a weapon. Loretta Young, the saint who enforced her morality with an iron fist. Loretta Young projected an image of devout Catholicism and refined morality. Her elegant beauty combined with an air of virtue made her Hollywood's most respectable leading lady. She ran clean sets where profanity wasn't tolerated, positioning herself as the industry's moral conscience. But her righteousness concealed both cruelty and hypocrisy. The infamous swear box became legendary on her sets. Any crew member who used language she deemed offensive had to pay a fine. This wasn't playful. It created an atmosphere of constant surveillance and fear. The swear box was about control, not morality. But Young's greatest cruelty was reserved for her daughter. Judy Lewis was born in 1935, the result of an affair between Young and Clark Gable during Call of the Wild. Rather than face scandal, Young hid her pregnancy, secretly gave birth, and placed Judy in an orphanage. 19 months later, she adopted the child, creating an elaborate fiction. Judy grew up knowing something was wrong. She looked remarkably like Clark Gable. The ears, the smile, the features were unmistakable. Young lied for decades. She sent Judy to convents. She made Judy hide her resemblance through hairstyles and makeup, creating an environment of secrecy and shame. When Judy finally confronted her mother in 1966, Young only admitted the truth because continued lying was no longer sustainable. The hypocrisy was staggering. Young hid her own sin while judging other actresses harshly and enforcing rigid standards on everyone else. Her religious devotion was actually narcissism wrapped in piety. The pain Young caused Judy lasted a lifetime. The saint was a hypocrite who weaponized religion to control and hurt others. Before we continue, understand this. What you're hearing wasn't just Hollywood gossip or personality conflicts. These were systematic patterns of abuse, enabled by a studio system that valued profits over people, protected by a press that needed access more than truth, and suffered by victims who had no power to fight back. The glamour was real. So was the cruelty hidden beneath it. Young's hypocrisy came from twisted morality, but Jean Tierney's vindictiveness emerged from personal tragedy that she transformed into a weapon against the innocent. Jean Tierney. When tragedy turned a star into a tormentor. Jean Tierney was one of Hollywood's most breathtaking beauties, known for her performances in Laura and Leave Her to Heaven. Her exquisite features and sophisticated presence made her a star of the 1940s. But behind the elegance lay a woman whose personal tragedy transformed her into someone capable of profound cruelty toward those who'd done nothing to deserve it. In 1943, while pregnant with her first child, Tierney contracted German measles after a fan broke quarantine at the Hollywood canteen to meet her. The result was devastating. Her daughter Daria was born with severe disabilities, including profound hearing loss, vision problems, and developmental challenges. The emotional toll on Tierney was immense, and she struggled with the guilt and grief for years. What made this tragedy darker was what happened years later. Tierney encountered the same fan at a tennis party. The woman cheerfully admitted she'd broken quarantine to meet Tierney, mentioning she'd had German measles at the time, but just had to see her favorite star. She had no idea what she'd caused. Tierney said nothing at that moment, but the knowledge destroyed something inside her. The woman who'd been known for graciousness became bitter and cruel in her private life. Those close to her reported that Tierney became vindictive toward anyone she perceived as thoughtless or selfish. Her treatment of younger actresses on sets grew harsh and dismissive. She made cutting remarks designed to wound, delivered with the same cool beauty that had made her famous. Friends described her as having lost all patience for human weakness, becoming judgmental and cold. Her mental health deteriorated severely. She was hospitalized multiple times and underwent more than 24 rounds of treatment that left her with significant memory loss. The tragedy of her daughter's condition, combined with the knowledge of how it happened, created a bitterness that poisoned her relationships and her career. Tierney eventually found some peace in her later years and even remarried. But colleagues from her darkest period described a woman transformed by grief into someone capable of deliberate cruelty. The innocent fan's thoughtless decision had created ripples of pain that extended far beyond one family. It had turned a gracious star into someone who hurt others simply because she herself had been hurt. The beautiful star of Laura became a cautionary tale of how tragedy can corrupt even the most elegant of souls. Tierney's cruelty stemmed from profound loss, but Ava Gardner's vindictiveness was simpler. She had power, and she used it to hurt. Ava Gardner, the goddess who ruined her ex-husband for sport. Ava Gardner was celebrated as one of the most beautiful women in Hollywood. Her tumultuous marriages were framed as passionate tragedies. She loved too deeply, too intensely. Her relationship with Frank Sinatra became the stuff of legend. Mickey Rooney was her first husband, a brief marriage in 1942 when both were young. The marriage lasted barely a year. Both moved on, or so it appeared. After their divorce, Gardner embarked on a campaign of public humiliation. In interviews, she mocked Rooney's height, making emasculating jokes about his physical stature and manhood. She gave detailed, degrading accounts of their intimate life to reporters. She deliberately flaunted her affairs with more famous, powerful men. Sinatra, Howard Hughes, others. And made sure Rooney knew about her comments. Friends reported that she enjoyed hearing about his reactions. Rooney was considering legal action at one point. Would Gardner's beauty protect her from consequences? She faced nothing. Beauty was armor. The campaign continued for years, long after she'd moved on to other relationships. Rooney was already struggling with career decline and severe financial problems. Friends reported Rooney would leave parties when Gardner's name came up. He couldn't defend himself without looking petty. She knew this. She continued anyway. Gardner's public mockery added humiliation to his troubles. She had all the power. She was at the height of her beauty and fame. He was yesterday's child star trying to maintain dignity. This wasn't self-defense. Their marriage had been brief, and both had moved on. This was extended public humiliation of someone who couldn't fight back on equal terms. She used her beauty, fame, and status as weapons to destroy a man's dignity. The purpose seemed to be entertainment, hers and the public's. When Gardner passed away in 1990, obituaries celebrated her beauty and her passionate life. Rooney, who lived until 2014, had to carry the public humiliation she'd inflicted for more than 70 years. The vindictiveness was unnecessary, prolonged, and revealed an ugly truth beneath the glamorous surface. Gardner's public humiliation campaign was mean-spirited, but Lana Turner's narcissism created an environment where her daughter was exposed to such danger that she was forced to commit violence. Lana Turner, the glamour girl, whose narcissism nearly destroyed her daughter. Lana Turner was Hollywood's glamour girl, the original sweater girl whose discovery at a drugstore counter became legend. Her platinum blonde beauty and tumultuous love life made her tabloid royalty. 8 marriages, countless affairs, always searching for true love. The press framed her romantic chaos as tragedy. Her daughter Cheryl lived in her mother's shadow, a footnote to Turner's dramatic life. But Turner's romantic chaos created real danger for her child. She brought men into their lives without considering Cheryl's safety. When Turner began dating Johnny Stompanato, she was involving herself with a violent mobster connected to Mickey Cohen. Stompanato was not a safe person. Turner knew this. She'd experienced his violent temper herself, yet she continued the relationship and exposed her teenage daughter to him. On April 4th, 1958, 14-year-old Cheryl heard Stompanato threatening her mother. She heard the violence escalating. She grabbed a kitchen knife and went to her mother's bedroom. What happened next was ruled justifiable. Cheryl ended Stompanato's life, saving her mother from serious harm or worse. A 14-year-old child committed an act of violence to protect her mother from a dangerous man her mother had chosen to bring into their home. During the inquest and in the aftermath, Turner's focus was on her own image and career. How would this affect her standing in Hollywood? What would the studios do? Her daughter had just experienced the most traumatic event imaginable, taking a life to save her mother. And Turner was worried about publicity. Cheryl's testimony revealed years of exposure to dangerous men, emotional neglect, and her mother's prioritization of romantic drama over her daughter's well-being. Turner never took real responsibility for creating the circumstances that forced her 14-year-old to commit violence. In her autobiography, she framed the incident as another tragedy in her dramatic life, focusing on her own suffering. Cheryl spent decades struggling with the trauma of that night. The glamour girl's self-absorption had endangered her child, then abandoned her to process the aftermath alone. Turner's narcissism created one night of violence that haunted her daughter forever. But Eddie Cantor's exploitation was systematic. He built his career on devoted fatherhood while allegedly controlling his daughter. Eddie Cantor, the beloved comedian who exploited his own daughters. Eddie Cantor was one of America's most beloved entertainers in the 1930s and 40s. His radio shows reached millions. His energetic performances delighted audiences. Central to his public image was his role as devoted father to 5 daughters. He featured them in his publicity, spoke about them in interviews, and presented himself as the ultimate family man. America loved Eddie Cantor and his 5 girls. Behind the public image, according to some accounts that emerged later, was a more complicated reality. While Cantor clearly loved his daughters, the relationship was shaped by his use of them for his career. They appeared in his publicity as part of the family brand. Their images helped sell the devoted father narrative that audiences loved. As the daughters grew older and sought independence, some family friends described Cantor's response as controlling. He reportedly struggled when they wanted to build lives that weren't centered on supporting his image and career. Some accounts mention emotional pressure, guilt tactics, expressions of disappointment, to continue playing their roles in his public narrative. The man who made millions partly on his devoted father image may have failed to respect his daughters' autonomy as adults with their own needs. Some accounts suggest they were expected to serve his career and remain available for public displays of family warmth. The warmth he showed on stage and radio may not have extended to supporting his daughter's complete independence. While some of his daughters spoke warmly of him after his passing, others indicated a more complex relationship than the public ever saw. Gardner's vindictiveness was unnecessary. But what Barbara Stanwyck said publicly about her son cuts deeper than any private cruelty. Barbara Stanwyck, the tough dame who destroyed her own son. "I have no son." Barbara Stanwyck said those words to an interviewer, and they appeared in print. Not "my son and I are estranged," or "we have difficulties." Simply, "I have no son." 4 words that erased a human being she'd chosen to adopt. 4 words that made a private rejection devastatingly public. Stanwyck embodied strength and capability on screen. Self-made, professional, respected by everyone in Hollywood. In 1932, she and her husband Frank Fay adopted a 10-month-old boy they named Dion. After her divorce from Fay, Stanwyck raised Dion as a single mother, while maintaining her demanding career. On the surface, it seemed like a story of a strong woman balancing career and motherhood. Dion's accounts painted a different picture. He described emotional coldness that went beyond reserve. He described deliberate cruelty, his mother comparing him unfavorably to other children, expressing regret at having adopted him, making clear through words and actions that he was a disappointment. Friends who knew both confirmed that Stanwyck treated her son with contempt from his teenage years onward. Then came that interview, that public disownment. "I have no son." She effectively erased him publicly. By the time both were adults, mother and son were essentially strangers. Stanwyck showed cold indifference when his name came up. The final confirmation came in her will. When Stanwyck passed away in 1990, her estate was worth several $1,000,000. She left Dion $5,000, the legal minimum to prevent him from contesting the will. Everything else went to friends, her publicist, and charities. The will was a final act of public rejection. Even in the end, She needed to make clear that he had no place in her life or legacy. The woman who played strong women on screen used her strength to crush the child who needed her. She adopted him, presumably wanting a family, then spent decades making him wish he'd never been born. The tough dame revealed herself to be someone who couldn't tolerate vulnerability, not even from the child she'd chosen. Stanwyck passed away successfully and celebrated. Dion carried the weight of her rejection until his own passing. The cost of her strength was his entire life. If these revelations have changed how you see Hollywood's golden age, please like this video and share it with others who love classic Hollywood history. The truth about our icons, both their artistry and their flaws, deserves to be known. Stanwyck destroyed the child she chose, but Constance Bennett distributed her cruelty democratically to everyone unfortunate enough to work with her. Constance Bennett, the sophisticated star who was universally despised. Constance Bennett commanded top dollar in the early 1930s, at one point earning more than any actress in Hollywood. Her business savvy and negotiating skills were legendary. She was glamorous, sophisticated, and successful by any measure. She should have been remembered as one of the era's great stars. Instead, she's largely forgotten. Perhaps because almost no one who worked with her had anything positive to say. The consistency of negative testimonies is remarkable. Directors described her as cold, dismissive, and deliberately unkind. Co-stars reported that she treated them with contempt, often delivering put-downs in front of crew to maximize humiliation. Her treatment of crew members was particularly appalling. She refused to acknowledge their existence, speaking about them in third person as if they couldn't hear her disparaging comments. Extras and background actors described her treatment as actively dehumanizing. She complained about their presence, demanded they be positioned where she wouldn't have to see them, and made clear they were beneath her notice. Her refusal to help younger actresses was notable even in competitive Hollywood. She didn't just decline to mentor, she actively worked to make their scenes more difficult. What makes Bennett's unpleasantness particularly striking is how democratic it was. She wasn't difficult only with people she viewed as threats. She was unpleasant to everyone. Powerful directors, fellow stars, hard-working crew members, aspiring young actresses, and people at the bottom of the industry ladder. She seemed to genuinely enjoy making others feel inferior. Unlike stars who were difficult but brilliant enough that people tolerated their behavior, Bennett's talent didn't outweigh her unpleasantness enough for Hollywood to remember her fondly. She's largely forgotten now, while warmer stars of her era remain beloved. The sophisticated, highest-paid actress of her era faded into obscurity, partly because she was so thoroughly unpleasant that few people wanted to preserve her memory. When Constance Bennett passed away in 1965, Variety's obituary was brief. Joan Crawford, who'd worked with her once, declined to comment. Even in the end, no one wanted to speak of her. Cruelty's final price? Erasure. Bennett's democratic cruelty made her universally despised, but Burt Lancaster's violence was selective. He saved his rage for those who threatened his carefully constructed image. Burt Lancaster, the intellectual action hero with violent hands. Burt Lancaster presented himself as Hollywood's thinking man's action star. Articulate, politically conscious, physically impressive, he seemed to represent a new kind of leading man for the post-war era. He spoke eloquently about social issues, supported progressive causes, and cultivated an image as an artist who happened to be built like an athlete. Audiences saw the acrobatic grace from his circus background, the intensity in films like From Here to Eternity, the intelligence he brought to every role. What they didn't see was what happened when someone challenged that carefully crafted image. The pattern emerged early in his career and continued for decades. On the set of Come Back Little Sheba in 1952, Lancaster's treatment of co-star Shirley Booth shocked the crew. When Booth's performance garnered more attention during dailies, Lancaster became hostile. He deliberately tried to upstage her during filming, and when that didn't work, he resorted to intimidation, standing too close, using his physical size to make her uncomfortable, delivering lines with barely controlled aggression that had nothing to do with the scene. But Lancaster's violence wasn't limited to psychological intimidation. Multiple reports from different productions describe physical altercations. During the filming of Trapeze in 1956, Lancaster allegedly struck a stunt coordinator who questioned his approach to a dangerous sequence. The incident was hushed up immediately. Lancaster's star power and the studio's investment in the film meant the stunt coordinator was paid off and signed a non-disclosure agreement. Journalist Robert Crane learned about Lancaster's temper firsthand in 1958. After writing a profile that questioned Lancaster's liberal credentials, Crane encountered the actor at an industry party. Witnesses described Lancaster grabbing Crane by the lapels and shoving him against a wall, threatening him in language that contradicted every sophisticated word Lancaster had ever spoken on camera. The story never appeared in print. Crane's editor stopped it, citing concerns about litigation. But everyone knew the real reason was fear of being shut out by Lancaster's production company. The most disturbing accounts came from those who worked in Lancaster's production offices. As he gained more power and formed his own production company with Harold Hecht, employees described an environment of fear. Lancaster's explosive temper meant assistants and junior executives never knew what might trigger a violent outburst. One former employee, speaking decades later on condition of anonymity, described watching Lancaster throw a typewriter across a room because a script had been delivered 30 minutes late. The same employee witnessed Lancaster shove a young assistant so hard the man fell and injured his wrist, then threatened to destroy his career if he sought medical attention or filed a complaint. Lancaster's violence was particularly directed at men he perceived as weak or effeminate. Multiple accounts describe homophobic remarks and physical intimidation of gay crew members and actors. The progressive activist who spoke eloquently about tolerance and justice revealed himself to be a bully who used his physical power to enforce a particular kind of masculinity on his sets. What makes Lancaster's case especially troubling is the contrast between his public persona and private behavior. He testified before Congress in support of civil rights. He spoke at rallies for workers' rights. He positioned himself as Hollywood's social conscience, all while creating workplaces where people lived in fear of his physical violence. The intellectual depth was real. Lancaster was genuinely well-read and politically informed, but he used that intelligence to construct an image that concealed his capacity for brutality. Several directors who worked with Lancaster once refused to work with him again, though they never publicly stated why. The Whisper Network in Hollywood knew to avoid certain situations with him. Never challenge him in front of others, never question his performance choices, never write anything that might puncture his self-image. Those who violated these unspoken rules faced consequences that were swift and often physical. Lancaster's violent incidents were consistently covered up by a combination of his own power, studio protection, and the complicity of a press that valued access over truth. His victims were paid off, threatened, or simply ignored. His public image remained intact, while those who'd experienced his rage carried the memory in silence. When Lancaster passed away in 1994, obituaries celebrated his artistry, his activism, and his contributions to independent cinema. The tributes mentioned his intensity, his intelligence, his physical grace. Not one mentioned the trail of frightened employees, intimidated co-stars, and physically threatened journalists he'd left behind. The thinking man's action hero had used both his mind and his fists as weapons, one to craft his image, the other to destroy anyone who threatened it. Lancaster used violence to protect his constructed image, but William Holden's self-destruction was quieter. He drank himself into oblivion while pushing away everyone who tried to help. William Holden, the golden boy who drowned in a bottle. William Holden was Hollywood's golden boy, literally. His breakout role in Golden Boy in 1939 launched a career spanning 4 decades. Handsome without being threatening, masculine without being overpowering, he embodied post-war American optimism. His performances in Sunset Boulevard, Stalag 17, and The Bridge on the River Kwai showcased genuine talent. He was the dependable leading man you could count on. Behind that reliable image was a man drowning. Holden's alcohol dependency began early and progressively worsened. What made his situation particularly tragic and cruel was how he weaponized his self-destruction against those who cared about him. His behavior on sets became increasingly erratic as his drinking intensified. During the filming of The Country Girl in 1954, director George Seaton and co-star Grace Kelly tried multiple interventions. Holden responded by showing up intoxicated deliberately, forcing delays and reshoots. He seemed to take satisfaction in making those who expressed concern watch him destroy himself. Stephanie Powers, his partner in his later years, described a pattern of emotional cruelty that accompanied his drinking. Holden would promise sobriety, accept help and support, then deliberately relapse in ways designed for maximum impact. He'd disappear on benders timed to important events, birthdays, holidays, career opportunities. The disappearances weren't accidents. They were calculated to hurt people who'd invested emotionally in his recovery. Multiple directors who worked with him described similar patterns. Holden would arrive sober for the first weeks of production, building trust. Then, once production was committed and couldn't easily replace him, the drinking would start. Production was delayed. Budgets ballooned. And through it all, Holden seemed grimly satisfied, as if proving that no one could save him was itself a victory. His treatment of his children was particularly painful. Friends described how Holden would arrange visits, creating expectations, then cancel at the last moment, often because he was too intoxicated to follow through. The pattern repeated throughout their childhoods. Hope, then disappointment. Promise, then abandonment. What made Holden's cruelty especially insidious was its passive-aggressive nature. He never raised his hand to anyone. He never screamed or threatened. Instead, he used his self-destruction as a weapon, forcing people who cared about him to watch helplessly as he chose alcohol over every relationship, every opportunity, every chance at happiness. The end came in November 1981. Holden had been drinking heavily and alone in his Santa Monica apartment. He tripped on a rug, hit his head on a nightstand, and lost consciousness. His body wasn't discovered for 4 days. The golden boy passed away alone, intoxicated, having successfully pushed away everyone who might have checked on him. But here's the cruelest detail. Friends revealed after his passing that Holden had been offered help countless times in his final years. Multiple rehabilitation facilities, interventions organized by people who loved him. He refused it all. The man who'd had everything, looks, talent, success, people who chose the bottle over life itself, and made sure everyone who tried to help him knew they'd failed. Holden's final act wasn't just self-destruction. It was a statement. You cannot save someone who's determined to be lost. The Golden Boy's real cruelty was forcing others to carry the guilt of his choices. When they found him, the apartment was filled with empty bottles. The dependable leading man had kept his only real appointment, the one with his own end. Holden destroyed himself while punishing those who cared, but Clifton Webb perfected a different kind of cruelty. The surgical precision of a man who never raised his voice, but left devastation in every perfectly enunciated. Clifton Webb, the elegant monster who made cruelty an art form. Clifton Webb embodied sophistication. His portrayal of Waldo Lydecker and Laura defined the elegant, acerbic intellectual. As Mr. Belvedere, he made prissy superiority charming. His clipped diction, impeccable manners, and razor-sharp wit made him one of Hollywood's most distinctive character actors. Audiences loved him because he made condescension entertaining. But for those who worked with him, Webb's wit wasn't entertainment. It was a scalpel used for vivisection. Webb didn't shout. He didn't need to. His weapon was the perfectly constructed insult, delivered with such elegance that victims sometimes didn't realize they'd been eviscerated until hours later. His cruelty was premeditated, calculated for maximum psychological impact while maintaining plausible deniability. After all, he was just being witty, wasn't he? Young actors on his films described a consistent pattern. Webb would identify their deepest insecurity, physical appearance, talent, education, background, and craft remarks that struck precisely at that vulnerability. He delivered these observations in front of cast and crew with perfect comic timing so that others laughed. The victim was left with an impossible choice: object and seem humorless or laugh along while hurting inside. His treatment of actress Anne Baxter during The Razor's Edge in 1946 exemplified his method. Baxter, younger and less experienced, made the mistake of asking Webb for advice on a scene. His response, delivered loud enough for the entire set to hear, dissected not just her performance, but her appearance, intelligence, and worth as an actress, all phrased as helpful criticism. Crew members reported that Baxter locked herself in her dressing room for 2 hours afterward. But Webb's cruelty extended beyond professional settings. His legendary Sunday afternoon salons at his home, where he lived with his mother, were known throughout Hollywood. Invitations were coveted. What guests didn't know until they arrived was that they were auditioning for the role of Webb's target. He would select one person per gathering and spend the afternoon systematically humiliating them through witty observations that left everyone else laughing and the victim mortified. The pattern was consistent enough that some actors learned to decline his invitations, but younger performers, eager to network, continued attending and providing Webb with fresh victims. He seemed to need an audience for his cruelty. Private meanness wasn't sufficient. His relationship with his mother, Mabel, revealed another dimension of his cruelty. Webb lived with her his entire adult life. Their codependent relationship the subject of Hollywood gossip. But those close to the situation described something darker than mere codependence. Webb used his mother as both excuse and weapon. He blamed her for his romantic failures while simultaneously using her presence to make houseguests uncomfortable. He orchestrated situations where his mother would embarrass visitors, then claimed helplessness. Multiple directors who worked with Webb described him as professionally competent, but personally unbearable. He was never late, always knew his lines, hit his marks perfectly, but created such a poisonous atmosphere that other actors dreaded scenes with him. His perfectionism wasn't about the work. It was about having legitimate reasons to criticize others. What made Webb's cruelty particularly insidious was its sophistication. Lancaster's violence was crude and obvious. Webb's cruelty was refined, wrapped in perfect grammar and impeccable delivery. He made cruelty aspirational, something people laughed at and even admired because it was done with such style. He convinced people that his treatment of others was acceptable because he was so clever about it. The cost of his cruelty was measured in damaged careers and wounded psyches. Young actors who encountered Webb early in their careers described lasting impacts on their confidence. Some left Hollywood entirely. Others learned to avoid certain productions, anywhere Webb might appear. When Webb passed away in 1966, obituaries celebrated his performances and his wit. One of Hollywood's most sophisticated stars, they said. What they didn't mention were the careers he'd undermined, the countless people he'd humiliated for sport, the atmosphere of fear his presence created. The man who made condescension charming on screen had used that same gift to torment real people in real life. The sophisticated monster's final cruelty was his legacy. For decades after his passing, actors studied his performances, admiring his wit and timing. Some even copied his acerbic persona. not realizing they were perpetuating a style of interaction rooted in deliberate psychological harm. Webb had made cruelty elegant, and Hollywood loved him for it. These 21 stories reveal more than just individual cruelty. They expose the systematic power structures that protected abuse in Hollywood's golden age. What we've uncovered isn't a collection of isolated incidents, but patterns that persisted across decades because the studio system prioritized profits and images over human dignity. The most disturbing aspect isn't that these stars were cruel. It's that their cruelty faced virtually no consequences. Studios buried scandals, paid off victims, and threatened anyone who might expose the truth. The press, dependent on studio access, looked the other way or actively participated in covering up abuse. Victims, whether abused children, assaulted teenagers, blacklisted actors, or tormented colleagues, had no recourse. Speaking out meant career destruction. Staying silent meant carrying trauma alone. Here's what haunts me most. Christina Crawford waiting decades to tell her story. Judy Lewis discovered at 30 that her entire identity was a lie. The Crosby sons who couldn't escape their father, even in the end. Joan Seberg, destroyed at 17 by a director's cruelty, never recovering. Daria Tierney, robbed of a normal life by one thoughtless fan. And a mother who became cruel because of it. These weren't just secrets, they were sentences. And the guards were applause, adoration, and Academy Awards. The studio system created perfect conditions for abuse. Absolute power concentrated in the hands of a few stars and executives, victims with no power or protection, and a publicity machine designed to bury any truth that threatened profitability. Add to this the era's prejudices against women, minorities, children, anyone different. And you have a system where cruelty could flourish unchecked. But here's what we must understand. Loving these stars' films doesn't require excusing their behavior. We can appreciate Bing Crosby's voice while acknowledging the sons he destroyed. We can admire Bette Davis's performances while recognizing the women she sabotaged. We can enjoy those elegant dance numbers while knowing about the prejudices held by one of the dancers. Art and artists are not the same thing. These revelations don't erase their contributions to cinema. They complete our understanding of them as complex, flawed human beings. The glamour was real. The talent was real. The artistry that gave us some of cinema's greatest moments was real. But so was the cruelty, the abuse, the prejudice, and the human cost hidden behind carefully crafted images. Perhaps most importantly, these stories remind us that fame and talent don't excuse cruelty, that victims deserve to be believed even when their abusers are beloved, and that the price of silence is measured in broken lives and perpetuated cycles of abuse. Power without accountability corrupts. Silence protects abusers, and the price of maintaining illusions is always paid by those with the least power to refuse. The Golden Age gave us extraordinary art and unforgettable performances, but it also protected monsters, silenced victims, and prioritized images over justice. We can honor the era's artistry while acknowledging its darkness. We can love the films while remembering the real people who suffered to create them, and the real people who suffered because of those who created them. These 21 stars shine no less brightly on screen for having been revealed as deeply flawed human beings. If anything, knowing the full truth makes us more discerning consumers of both art and celebrity, more sympathetic to those who suffer in silence, and more aware that the images we see are rarely the whole story. The Golden Age is gone, but its lessons remain. The importance of accountability, the cost of silence, and the truth that behind every perfect image, there are real human beings with the capacity for both great artistry and terrible cruelty. Thank you for watching this exploration of Hollywood's hidden history. If you've made it this far, you've engaged with some difficult truths about icons we were taught to revere without question. That willingness to see the whole picture, both the art and the darkness, is how we honor both the achievements and the victims of Hollywood's golden age. Subscribe for more honest explorations of the era that created modern cinema. And remember, the stars were never as perfect as their images suggested. And the truth, however uncomfortable, is always worth knowing. This is Golden Age Files, where we celebrate the artistry while never forgetting the cost.